In this episode, I speak with Irene Lyon. She is a nervous system expert and somatic healer. And we're going to explore what is somatic healing. You might have come across this term before, or it's possible that this is the first time you've ever heard about it. Somatic healing is essentially learning the language of your body and your emotions and how to process that energy through your body so that it doesn't get stuck in our system as anxiety. Irene and I discuss this concept through this episode, and Irene shares an amazing story about how functional freeze showed up for her. She wasn't someone who wasn't connected to her emotions. She wasn't, as she says, a cold bitch. However, when she did more of this work in her training to become a somatic practitioner, she discovered how much she'd been blocked to her emotions, and I think we can all relate to the story she shares. We also discuss what is survival stress and how can we release these trapped emotions in the body. This was such an enlightening discussion. You guys are going to enjoy this so much. Go have a listen. Let's go to the show. Welcome, Irene. I can't wait to talk to you and pick your brains about the work that you do and hear all about your story. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Georgie. It's very good to be here and talk to you. If you hear a noise every now and again, I live near float planes, like planes that land in the sea. So
wow.
one just flew by, and it's that time of day where they're flying a lot. So just FYI, if you hear like this rumble,
I
it'll be
love it.
gone. Yeah.
Look, in a time where Australians can't travel internationally, it's a cultural experience. I'm
There
all
you
for
go.
it.
Yeah. You've got the ocean there, the mountains there. You can't see them, but they're there.
Oh,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So, Irene, you're coming to us from Canada. Yeah.
Vancouver.
And Vancouver. I was in Vancouver just before everything went down and the world closed down
Great.
in
Yeah.
literally March, like 2020.
Wow. Where were you, in the city, or were you going
I was
somewhere?
I was visiting, I was in Whistler.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
So
lived there for 13 years, so I know it well.
we've already had a little back catch up just before I hit record, and
Yeah.
we're just finding all these little crossovers. Irene also lived
Yeah.
near Sydney and Wollongong, like amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to start us off, Irene. Let's
Yeah.
find your story. So tell me, like,
Sure.
how did you get to where you are now? Like, what kind of started this whole journey for you?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's a few pieces to it. One of the pieces actually was really sparked when I was in Wollongong. So I'll leave that as a teaser for a second, or a kind of on the side. But it really started in high school. I was a big skier, like downhill skier. That's why I lived in Whistler for as long as I did. And I got injured racing, tore a main ligament in my knee, called the anterior cruciate, for those of you who know your knee joints. Had to have that operated on. It was a fine surgery, really easy. Recovered, rehabbed, and I got interested in just the human body in that moment in high school. So I decided to apply to, here we would call it kinesiology, which is different in Australia and Britain. But for us, that's exercise science, um, fitness, health, nutrition. So I studied that for about 7 years, actually. I took a little longer to do my undergrad. Um, and then in that time, Georgie, I kept skiing and I kept playing soccer and all these things that we do to our bodies. And I kept getting injured. And then I had more surgeries. And then I don't know the exact age. It was like 1999, I think. I had my third ACL knee rupture and repair. So I did twice on the left, once on the right. So the left was getting repaired. It got repaired. It was a great repair. And then I was walking down my stairs in Whistler, where I was living at the time. And about 3 steps from the bottom of the landing, I went to go put my left foot down. And my muscle, my quadricep muscle, which is the front thigh muscle, as soon as it contracted, which is what it has to do when you step down, my kneecap just completely split in half.
Oh my
And
gosh.
yeah, it's always, everyone always is like, yes, it was really painful. And I didn't know what it was, but I heard it. It was the sound of like a ratchet, like, and, you know, breath taken away, drop to the ground, go to the medical clinic, x-ray. Sure enough, it's a broken kneecap, got it fixed. That was a very tough injury to recover from. It really is one of the worst bones to break in your body. And went into my rehab world with the stuff that I was teaching other people how to do, and it wasn't working. Like, I was strong and I looked fit, and I was fit cardiovascularly, and I was strong, but I was in a lot of pain, and I didn't know why. And I kind of fast forwarded, because when this severe pain and discomfort happened, that's when I was in Australia. So this happened here in Canada. And around that time, I was scheduled to go to the uni in Wollongong to do my graduate studies there. So I had to resume my recovery and my rehab while I was there. And I was seeing a physical therapist at the university, and he was great. He's like, I don't know what's going on, but something's not right. You got to go see someone else who's up the road. He's another PT, but he does something called the Feldenkrais Method. And I was like, okay. And so I went up to Thirroul, which is this cute little town on the coast, and saw this guy. And no word of a lie, within about 4 weeks of doing the work that he suggested I do, my whole body had changed. I had repatterned my movements. I felt light as a feather. In that 4 weeks, I kind of vowed, he's like, don't stretch, don't do any core exercises. You can go for a swim, you can go for a bike ride, a hike, but don't do the specific things that you think you need to do to strengthen your body. And so I was kind of sick of doing this stuff, to be honest. So I said, okay. And I just focused. I saw him maybe only 3 times in that period, but he sent me home with tapes, like good old cassette tapes. And I was doing them every other day. And it was just these really gentle, awareness-based movements. And now, I didn't know what was going on at the time, Georgie, but now that I know, I was relearning how to move again. I was learning how to move the way a baby would learn spontaneously when they are infants, crawling and rolling and sitting up, and they're not learning how to move by contracting their core. They might, but they're not thinking, I'm going to do this. It's all very organic. Wow. So I did this. And to be honest, I kind of forgot about it because I got better, and I was so young at the time. I was in my mid-20s that it just like sucked into my body, and I was fine. When I got back to Canada about a year or so later, I wanted to look it up. Like, what is this stuff that I did? And at that time, Google was just starting to show its face or head. And so I was like, let's do this Google thing. And I looked up Feldenkrais and found out what it was. It was a person. He invented this work back in the 60s, really the 50s and 40s, but it got pushed out a bit more in the 80s, right before his death. He was old. So I decided to study it. And that was a huge leap, because I had already done 7 years of science studying the human body. I had just completed 2 years of biomedical science graduate work. Technically, by that moment, you should be like, I should get a job, just, do those things. And I was working at the fitness center in Whistler. I worked there for like 13 years. But I needed to study more, because it wasn't enough what I had learned in class in university. The science wasn't enough. I needed this extra stuff that back then you would consider it kind of woo-woo stuff, but it's not. It's very much based in science. It's very much based in human function and how we relate to the environment. So I did that. That was in 2004. Loved it. Like, my system was the best it's ever been in those 4 years when I was training, because I was just, it's almost like an applied martial art. So I got my training, I started seeing clients, and then doing great work. But then, Georgie, there was this moment in '08 when I was seeing a few people over the summer of '08. I still remember it. And they weren't getting better with the Feldenkrais work, the way it had helped me and the way it was helping a very large chunk of my students.
Isn't that always the way? There's always like the anomalies, and you're like,
there's always the anomaly.
I've cracked the code on what works, and then
I've given up on that. I mean, I know that what I do now is very solid, because I've just seen the results from my private practice and of course the people I work with online. But I've learned to never say that's it. And even just this past month, I've been coming across new things that are just blowing my mind in terms of healing at other levels. So then I was sort of going to myself, well, this is really crazy. And what was happening were the people that weren't getting better had had really significant accidents, traumas, abuses, things that were just really, really difficult. And you could tell that there was something not quite there with their bodies. Like they were definitely not there. Like they were there, but their mind was somewhere else. Their body was dissociated. We would do some work with them, and then 2 days later, everything would be back to the way it was before. So things weren't sinking in. And then that's when I started to look into this, and that led me to the work of Peter Levine, who's the founder of Somatic Experiencing, and he was really the leader in our world of discovering that humans trap survival stress. We call it trauma, but it's actually survival stress in the system. And then that's what creates trauma responses, or PTSD, for example. So I then decided, okay, well, I guess I better study this. So I did my training in the SE world. And then from there, there's always branches. And so I did some studies with learning about early trauma, developmental trauma, surgical traumas, sexual trauma, all the traumas that you can think of, and just immersed from '08 to kind of 2015-ish. And then I just kind of went into full work mode when I got to that level. And so I've just been working ever since.
Incredible. So
yeah.
Had you ever had personal experience of this survival stress being trapped in the body?
I didn't know that I did.
Yeah.
So, right. Like I was, so there's a term that we have in our world, this somatic healing world, called functional freeze. I don't know if you've come across that, but there's fight, flight, and freeze. So our autonomic nervous system, if there's a threat, it will ramp up a threat response, a stress response to the threat, or even the perceived threat, because humans can perceive things. We can conjure stuff up in our mind, and we can actually create a biological reaction without anything there. So we know that.
Yeah, or so just a scary email from work, like,
yeah,
oh my gosh, there's stuff I have to do.
Yeah. And so there's these, there's sort of these a spectrum, if you will, of levels. And so I was like, okay, I need to, I lost my train of thought there. Oh, right. Freeze. So functional freeze. So here I am in the somatic experiencing training there because I want to learn it for my clients.
Yeah.
Okay. And I was really enjoying it. And because of my somatic background, because I was trained in this mind-body work, which is the Feldenkrais Method, and I was in exercise science and I was an athlete, I was really connected, I thought, to my body. And I was very skilled physically, but I didn't realize how shut down my emotions were. And bear in mind, I wasn't like this cold bitch that didn't have friends. I had fallen in love. I had good people in my life, social. I had no trouble being in public, getting on a plane by myself, traveling the world. Like I was very functional, but there was this underlying freeze that wasn't even in my awareness. And so I'll tell you the story about how it broke apart, if you will. I was
love
sitting
these stories.
yeah. Not many people hear this story, so your audience, they're lucky. So I'm sitting in this training in California with two of my peers and one assistant in the training. And that day or that afternoon, I can't remember which it was, we were supposed to study and experience and work with the concept of horror. So something horrific. And I remember the instructor giving us this sort of instruction. And I was like, well, I haven't seen anything horrific. And to my knowledge, I hadn't seen a dead body. I hadn't seen a gruesome car accident. I mean, I had seen, movies where things blow up and that kind of thing, but nothing like in front of me. I hadn't had a parent die, I'm like, what could it possibly be? So I was just sitting there with my peers and tuning into my body, because this is how you do the work. You kind of don't want to force it. You just sit with it, be with it, connect to the ground, notice the environment, feel their presence. And what happened was my arms, you can sort of see my arms, I think, they started to go into this position. I'll stand up just so you can see it. This position that was, and I just did that really quickly. It happened much slower than that, but I ended up in this position to my arms to this side.
It's almost like you're cradling a baby or something, like
kind of.
Yeah.
Very close. And so I went to that position. And as I went to that position, I started to, no, I didn't even feel. It was a memory, just comes into my mind. And so what the memory was, and now I have to pause that part of the story and tell you another part of my life. Both of my parents were veterinarians. So cats, dogs, they were animal doctors, like their whole lives. And I was literally born and raised in an animal hospital because it was in our house. And then, there's no babysitters because no one has any money back then. And so I was with them 24/7 at the animal hospital until I was old enough to go to school. And so as soon as I was tall enough to stand at the treatment table, my dad put me to work holding animals while they were having their nails cut, their ears cleaned, stitches, but also, Georgie, while they were being put under for surgery, but also euthanized.
Right.
And so in that moment, I just had this flood of every single emotion of anger, sadness, grief. It's as if I felt every single animal soul go through my body that I had held. And I have probably held thousands of dogs and cats as they were either being put under for surgery or put down because they were old, sick, whatever. I have scars still on my hands from them scratching me, like just all of the emotion that goes with that. And they're scared, right? And so I was actually, and to this day, I can take an animal and hold it down and like give it an injection or give it medicine with one hand and the other hand holding it, because I learned so young how to do it. Right. But what was so interesting, so that happened, and it was as if it was like the crack, it was like what cracked the egg open. And I just was going, I was like, what just happened? And I was really shooken up. Now that I look back, I'm like, wow, I had no idea how much I was holding in. And so what occurred after that was just kind of this series of things shifting in my body. And I think it was that same training segment that I started getting what felt like nerve, not pain, but sensation just shooting through me. And it was a completely new experience. And one of my favorite assistants, bless her heart, she was like, I said to her, I don't know what's going on. Am I having a stroke? Am I having, what is this? And she just looks at me straight in the eye and she's like, Irene, you've been in freeze your entire life, honey, like your entire life. And and it wasn't even a tear thing. It was just like, Oh, I get it. Like it really dropped when I had her just say that to me. And I mean, that would have been in 2010, 9-ish. And then what occurred after that is I started doing more work on the surgeries that I had had from those knee surgeries. And everything just, I mean, just stuff just started. I had all sorts of symptoms for years and years and years, which we don't have to get into, but it was just like things were dumping out of my body. And even to this day, because of my sport background, I'm still working on old shocks in my system. I used to paraglide, so I was in the air, G-forces going through my body, falling on things. There's been a lot that my system has stored. So all that to say, we can be really, really, really traumatized, but in a functional way. Because I was functional. I wasn't, suffering from post-traumatic stress. I didn't have chronic fatigue. I didn't have an autoimmune condition. I was just storing all this stuff.
What was that
Yeah.
like? So you've been in freeze your entire life, but you've been able to open your heart to love and have all these experiences. Can you just like bring that into, a bit more of what's that look like?
Well, here's what's interesting about that. Just before that all broke open, like literally that year before this incident that I just talked about, I was married previous to now, and it wasn't abusive or anything like that, but it was just wasn't, we weren't matched.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know the signs. And so when we have this functional freeze on board, we will pick people, we will choose things, not necessarily because that's what, like, it seems like a good idea, but something isn't right. And so what occurred as I started to learn about this trauma stuff through that somatic experiencing lens, I just started to get like extreme disgust for my husband. And it just was like, not because he was being, abusive, like there was some emotional stuff, but it's because we just weren't. And I didn't know how to set boundaries. I didn't know how to stand my ground. So it was sort of like hard to describe. And I'll actually give you an example, because now I'm married to a wonderful man, and it's completely different. But just the other night, we were driving, we had to drive somewhere. I had to drop my car off to get serviced. Snow tires have to go on at this time of year. So I had to drop it off. And so he had to drive with me so he could take me home. And as we were driving, I had this sense, because we hadn't seen each other all day. I was like excited to get in the car with him and then spend 30 minutes driving back home. Right? That's when you know you're with the right person. When you actually are looking forward to getting in that car and talking about your day. With my previous husband, my ex-husband, I would have dreaded that car ride back.
Yes, but because you were in the freeze, right, there's a part of you shut down.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
There was just always this friction. So it's sort of kind of like, I have this saying, Georgie, I often say, it's nobody's fault and it's everyone's fault. Yeah. And by that, I mean, culturally, socially, industry, humanity, our human condition, like we're just all kind of in this weird soup of not realizing how much we've had to shut down, basically to survive in our society, in our family system. What my parents did to me wasn't malicious. Like they were just bringing me into the family business, and I was probably with them more than most kids were with their parents who were out at work all day long. And I learned so much working there, clearly, but they didn't understand at that young age. I was shutting my system down every time I held one of those dogs or cats. And it was just part of it. Yeah. So, and I think it's an interesting thing, because people often will say, well, I haven't had any trauma. And I would have been that person to say, well, I haven't had any trauma. Like I haven't been hit, I haven't been raped, I haven't been in a massive car accident, I didn't grow up in a war zone.
Yeah, I used to say that too.
Yeah. And so there's kind of this, the word trauma has gotten a bad rap because yes, there are those things. But what I have found, and my husband, who's a colleague of mine, will back me up on this, and my colleagues and teachers, it's trickier to work with the people like me because we seemingly look fine. And we've micromanaged so much, and who we are isn't actually who we are. We've molded ourselves to circumstance and situation. And to break out of that, it takes time.
Oh my gosh. And this is why we have you on the Anxiety Reset podcast, where we're talking to women with high functioning anxiety, where literally we get on with our lives. We look like we got it all together on the outside. It's all fine. And it's on some level, you could keep going like that and it's fine. Maybe you'll end up burning out, or your body will, something often comes in and says it's too much now. But that's so what we see. And it's that, it sounds like what you're describing, Irene, is that disconnect from basically what we call your heart, like what you're really feeling. And because we've had to close it to just get through.
I would say it's definitely a disconnection from the heart space, the heart chakra, whatever you want to call it. And it's also a disconnection from our gut. Like our gut is technically our first brain. When we're born, we don't have the cognitive capacity to understand what's going on around us, but our gut does. It is very intelligent, and it's a sensory organ. I mean, it's a functional organ. It digests food and all that, but it also senses. That's why people say, I have a gut sense about something, right? Like we'll use these terms that we don't even realize are depicting something doesn't feel right in my belly. I have butterflies in my stomach, right? And yes, I have a heavy heart, or my throat is wanting to clamp down. All these, or my loins are feeling really scared or nervous or excited. So yes, we've been taught, men and women, to be good little soldiers and push through. And I'm all for hard work and doing what has to get done. But we also have to figure out a way to honor what's going on in the physiology and its needs, because we will get sick. And we know this. We're seeing it earlier now in people, things that would happen in people's 60s, late 50s are happening in people's 20s. Even teenagers have anxiety, have gut problems. People are getting cancer, from what I know, younger. People are having heart attacks younger, diabetes younger, all these autoimmune conditions. And it's very much, lots of the research has connected this chronic level of fight, flight, freeze, and then the shutdown that can come with it to a lot of these. I don't like the term mental illness because it's not really mental. It's actually physiological illness, but we label it as mental.
Yeah.
It's survival stress. And then of course, because we have this super, super strong mind, wherever that lives, and thinking capacity with our cerebral cortex, we can create so many stories about what we're feeling to not feel what we're feeling, because we haven't been taught how to feel our insides. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. We're taught to cut off from that. In Australia, we have a saying like, take a shot of concrete and harden up.
Oh God, I've never heard that one. That's insane.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we would say, yeah, suck it up, buttercup.
Yeah.
If it's a girl. But then the classic, big boys don't cry, boys don't cry. Yeah. That kind of thing. Take a shot of concrete. That's like intense.
I know. It's really like become a statue.
Like that would hurt.
I know. And so what can we do to mitigate some of these, all these survival stresses that our bodies you know, take their toll. Because I was one of those people too. I didn't think that I'd been through trauma. And then I was like, oh, hang on, my parents divorced. I actually was bullied in high school, but not in the typical like wedgies and, you know, that kind of being punched in the face kind of way. I was bullied in that girl bullying way of exclusion and that sort of sense. And so these kind of things, and you know, there's little those moments where you like a boy and he rejects you or says something that's like hurtful, and you take that on in your body. And where does it go? So I can relate on those levels as well. It's not just the big things that we kind of look at. So what do we do, Irene? How can we sort of mitigate some of this stress?
Yeah, so there's external stress, like there's stuff that's occurring in our world, and then there's the stuff that's occurring inside of us due to our history, and also due to how we were raised. And that is really important because some folks can handle a lot of external stress because they had good enough regulation. I could say that I was one of those. I had good attunement. I know I did, from my parents and those sorts of things. The traumas were different. They were external in a strange way. What the first step really, Georgie, is education. And in a world where people want quick tips and fancy memes that give them, you know, little shots of insight and wisdom.
Yeah, the 15-second reel video.
I can't do it. And you know, a lot of people want them, but it backfires when I try because there is too much complexity in how a 45-year-old woman, a 35-year-old man, a 60-year-old grandmother, whatever, our histories are so different. And so to give you an example of how to just really have your listeners understand this, let's just say, and this is my classic example, like here in Canada, we have bears, like black bears, grizzly bears, all that sort of stuff. In Russia, they also have bears, probably similar kinds. And when those bears, mother bear has her cubs, how she treats them in Canada and in Russia, I can guarantee you it's the same. Just like the birds here and the birds over there, they're going to mate, they're going to lay their eggs, they're going to protect those nests like crazy. They have the same innate language of how to take care of their young. I think you would agree with that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Humans don't do that, at least not in industrialized, domesticated worlds. We could say that back in the day of the hunter-gatherer, when things were much more basic, more subsistent, you're roaming the land, you don't have the culture that we have now, the religion that we have now, the rules that we have now. They would mate. They would, you know, humans would have sex, get pregnant, you birth the baby, you feed the baby is with you all the time. The baby isn't sleeping by itself in a crib down the hallway with a baby monitor, right? Just like mother bear isn't going to leave her cubs alone while they're sleeping. They're all together in the den. Humans, like we are mammals as well as humans. So we have this human brain that's crazy and complex, but then we have this animal biology, and we need that kind of nurturing at the beginning. Because our nervous systems are pretty much exactly the same to these other mammals, we need connection, we need attunement, we need safety. And then when we get a little older, we need to learn right from wrong. We need boundaries, right? Because a mother bear she'll swat her little cub if it's going to somewhere it shouldn't, right? She's going to teach it what to do. And so because humans are so diverse, and our diversity is kind of what makes us human, that's wonderful. But we also have this biology that wants the same thing. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, your religion, your sex, we all have that need when we're infants, but most of us get different things. Yeah. Right?
Or it's inconsistent.
It's not consistent. You might have a father and a mother that are completely different, or a nanny or a grandparent that has you all day, and then you come back with mother and you're completely treated differently. That's confusing to a little nervous system. And like you said, divorce, right? That's, even if it was amicable, which often it isn't, but sometimes it is, that's still a rupture in the system of safety of that child, even if that child is 10 or 13.
Well, I was actually 19, so I can't, but it's still, I remember being told you're an adult now, but I still was like, I still want to know that my mom and dad are like, you know, there as supportive figures in my life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I give this little story with the bears because that's my way to really hit home. We need to learn deeply about our autonomic nervous system, how our systems work in conjunct with those fight, flight, freeze systems, how they relate to our gut, our immune system, our cardiovascular system, but also how we socially engage with others in the environment. A lot of accidents happen out there on, say, the road because people are not able to orient and see what's happening because they're so stuck in their stress response. They're functionally frozen. Sure, they're driving their car, but they're completely oblivious to one side of them because maybe they had an accident on that side. And so they're dissociated from that side. So when we get the education on board, things, from my experience, they start to spark up in the human. Granted, the human wants to learn about this stuff, right? This is where free will comes in. If someone has no interest in learning about how their physiology works, then this work will be very difficult for them to do. Someone might say, well, Irene, animals in the wild just know what to do. How come we do? It's like, well, you're right. We've been conditioned to not listen to our bodies. And because of the complexity and the different humans around us, we have to understand, oh, the reason why that barista at the coffee shop is being kind of testy is probably because they don't know how to socially engage. I'm just making that up.
Yeah.
For example, right? And I'm not going to get mad at her or him for that. That's just how they are. And because I've learned about the nervous system, I can see her eyes are darting, darting, darting. That's a sign of high level stress in the system. Or someone who can't stop talking to you and they won't let you go, right? And you're kind of giving them the social cues, like, I gotta go, and they don't pick it up, right? Someone who can't see that, they're not quite regulated in attuning to you. And that's where you have to kind of find ways to communicate, hey, I gotta go. Because you might end up standing there with that person for an hour and they have no awareness of it.
Yeah.
You see, so when we get the education on board, we actually start to understand human nature a lot more.
And so that person can learn to pick up on cues. Is it about being like, okay, now I'm paying more attention? Is it just that we need to focus more?
It's part of it. It's about having more self-awareness with yourself. So another big portion of the work that I do is teaching people how to, just like I mentioned at the very beginning of our talk, how I was relearning how to move my body. I blend that in to the principles of how the nervous system works. So I'm sort of reteaching, or not, I'm teaching, and then the recipient is relearning, or maybe learning for the first time how to actually feel what's happening in their guts.
Yeah.
They might have never have felt their digestion move, not because it's not moving, they just haven't known to even pay attention to it. Right? And this is how we end up with health problems, because we don't even notice that there's a pain that's been there for months until there's a tumor that is inoperable, for example.
Yeah, or I experienced this too when I used to binge eat, and I would eat to cope with stress.
Yep.
And it was a way of, it was that disconnection from the body. I would notice like when it's too late, when I'm over full and my stomach feels really painful, but it was only when that signal was so loud that I would actually hear it.
Well, the interesting thing with that is that when we eat, it's instigating a part of our parasympathetic nervous system that calms us down. And so while it's not a good strategy in the long run, it is one way to soothe someone. You know, you're sick, you're scared, have a cup of tea, have a bowl of soup, like something to calm you. But yeah, the overeating is an interesting one. My husband, I'm allowed to talk about his history. He gives me permission. He was brought up in an abusive household. And so he had a totally different upbringing than me. We saw the world and still kind of do see the world differently because of that. But he overate a lot, like to the point where now he doesn't know how he did it. But back in the day in his 20s, he was numb. And so he had to eat lots to actually feel. And even though he felt gross afterwards, it was how he could feel himself was to overeat. But then of course you feel crappy the next day, and then the shame comes in. But the shame is coming in kind of reflection of he was shamed really badly as a kid. So he's sort of playing out what he knows from his childhood unconsciously. And so part of healing this stuff is A, the education, but then B, learning how to listen and really slow things down. Another big part is learning how to reconnect to the environment. It's something that we would call in our work learning how to orient to that which is around you. You would be surprised how many folks don't actually pay attention to their surroundings because they're in their head, or they're only in their bodies, because some people are so sensitive. All they feel is the stuff inside, that they don't even know that there's a world around them. It can go both ways. You can be totally numb.
Sounds like anchoring in the present moment in many ways too.
Anchoring in the present moment, yes. And then learning how to sense what's happening in the system or what might not be happening in the system. And then depending on your history, depending on where you are in your healing journey, there might need to be specific exercises, specific practices to kind of poke at the system in a stimulating way to create an effect so that a person can feel it. And then for others, they might need to learn how to resource, how to bring their system back down in a way that's helpful and not harmful. So food is an interesting one because that can be a huge resource for a lot of people. But when it goes overboard, or if it's not enough, in the case of someone not eating enough, that becomes harmful. So then it's like, well, what is another resource? You know, maybe someone loves music, or they love textures. So they love their blanket, you know, or they love reading a book, or they love nature, or they love their animal, or a stuffed animal, or something like that.
Yeah.
That can bring them back to the moment, but while they're feeling the intensity. Because not everybody can just sit with the intensity. And that's one of the mistakes of kind of that mindfulness world of just sit with the feelings, sit with the feelings. If someone doesn't know how to pull themselves out of that intensity, they can get trapped in that intensity to the point where the system shuts down, and then they stop feeling. And then they think, okay, I sat with it and now it's gone. But it's not gone, it's now numb.
Yes. So there has to be that, there has to be that ability to observe, step back like you're watching a movie almost of your life and observe. Is that what you mean?
Not so much. I'll use an example. So let's say someone has intense anxiety and it's physical, like their heart beats, they get sweaty, their gut goes all off, they get, you know, very, very scattered, they can't think. So I wouldn't say to someone like that in that world, just take a deep breath, right? Because that might not actually help. That actually might spike it more, because when we take a deep breath, it actually speeds the heart up. That's why the exhale is more important than the inhale. Can you make your exhales longer? Now, sometimes that works. It depends on the person, but I might say something like, can you just feel your feet on the floor? Can you move your feet? Can you dig them into the carpet? Can you feel them on the floor? can you feel your pelvis on the chair? And they might be like, yeah. I'm like, okay, well then just tune into that, dip into that contact. So it's not about distracting and pulling you out of the body, but keeping you in the body with a different focus.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for some, a breath might work. But what I've learned and what happens in this world is that stress, that anxiety, it's survival stress, it's fight and flee energy that's trapped. It wants to move out. It actually wants to escape. And we have to learn how to be with little doses of it while staying connected to the environment, to ourselves. For some people, Georgie, it might actually, I have a window in front of me. It's like, what's it like to look at that tree? It's like, oh, that looks good. And it's moving in the wind. I see some birds. And that can calm someone, but it's not taking them out of the environment. They're moving their attention to somewhere else in the environment. And then I might say, and what do you feel now in your system? And everyone's different. They might feel more or they might feel less. And so it depends on, again, the person's makeup, their history. It could be that when you have someone tune into this high heart, maybe they are like, I just want to run on the spot. I feel like running. It's like, okay, we'll stand up and run on the spot and let that come out and let that move, let that energy move. And so I've just given you a few different situations and how you might, someone's intensity, i.e. anxiety, may need these different things. And that is why learning about the system, having that education and the basics on board is so important, because then it isn't like me giving you a piece of paper saying, okay, when this happens, do this. When this happens, do that, because it might not work.
Yeah.
And then what occurs is someone thinks, well, there's something wrong with me because this person's saying to take a deep breath and exhale for 8 seconds when I feel my heart rate raise up and I get all sweaty in my palms, and it's actually getting worse. This must not be the right thing to do. And then we might say, yeah, it's not the right thing for you in that moment.
Yeah.
It might actually be great the next time you're somewhere else. But in that moment, a person, when they've learned how to track and they have these understandings, they become more masterful of what to do with that intensity.
Incredible. Okay, so I think I've got it now. Tell me if I'm right.
Yes.
It sounds like it's about decoding what the body needs or what you individually need in that moment, just like that instinctive nature of, I want to keep my baby with me at all times, and listening to that and responding to that moment to moment. And that language might change in different scenarios and on different days for you, but it's about being able to speak the language of your body to release the emotion, the stress that's stored up.
100%.
I got it.
You got it. You pass. And that actually, you cleverly used a good example there. When we're born, so I want to put this back full circle, because I've said how we're raised really determines how well we are and how resilient and regulated we are as adults. When a baby is born, they don't just have one sound, right? They have different sounds. They have different expressions. They have different temperatures. They change based on what it is that they're sensing inside. And then they make the cry, the whimper, the funny face. And as an adult who's taking care of that baby, the job of the adult is to attune to those different sounds and gestures and understand that language. And when you understand that language and you get to know it, you then give them what they need help with, whether it's gas, hunger, cold, tired, who knows, wet diaper, all these things. And by offering that to them, that teaches them how to come out of that stress response.
Wow.
So part of us as adults wanting to do this work, I don't like to say we're mothering ourselves, because that's a little weird. we're just relearning, or maybe learning for the first time how to attune to our physiology the exact same way you would want to attune to raise a healthy human.
I love that. That makes it so clear. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Irene, I'm going to have to let you go. I don't want to. I wish
okay.
But I do want to say, where can we find you for everyone who's just absolutely fascinated, like I am, by the work that you do, the way you help people to heal? Where can we find you?
It's just my name. So Irene, Irene, and then Lyon is spelled with a Y, no S.com. When you go to that site, you'll see me, you'll see more of my bio, my credentials, if people want to check those out. And then my programs, I have two main online courses. I've got tons of free resources, downloads. If you want to sample some of my audio work, which is practical, it's all there. There's ebooks. And then the YouTube channel has, I think last time I checked, over 300 videos covering all sorts of topics. There's short ones, there's long ones, there's lectures, there's Q&As, success stories, you know, all of it's there. And I'm on Instagram and all the social media feeds.
Fantastic. I will make sure that all that information is in the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. Thank you so much. It has been such an honor to speak with you, to hear your story. Just thank you so much for sharing.
You're welcome. And it's been fun to talk and to tell the tale. And I'll just say, for those listening, if you're listening and you got this far, you're here for a reason. So I hope something sparked, whether you further your knowledge immediately or tomorrow, it doesn't matter. Just keep this close, because so many of my students who are older, when they get it, and by older, I mean in their 80s, 70s, will say, why did no one teach this to me in my 20s or 30s or 40s or 50s? They grieve the loss of not knowing this sooner. So just know that this is to me not a fad. This work, this is very important work. It's going to reteach us how to be, you know, humans that are kind and empathetic and just live out of survival. That's my opinion. So thank you, Georgie.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Irene.
You're welcome.
To get to the root cause of your anxiety and leave no stone unturned, covering every facet of the anxiety reset method, from the thoughts you think to the health of your gut, your nutritional status, your hormones, and your lifestyle, then jump on the waitlist for the 90-day Anxiety Reset Program. This is the tried and tested path to help you find your true self, feel more balanced, and really become the master of your anxious mind. You'll be first to hear about the exciting upgrades when the program is next available, and you'll also hear exclusive benefits around the membership program that will be offered very soon. And if you want me all to yourself and have the VIP treatment, then join the waitlist to become a private client in the Balance program. Through our intensive 3-month program, we work closely together, tailoring a plan specific to every individual need you have. Completing your application for Balance, you'll be the first to hear when my next client space opens. And no matter which option you decide is best for you, I'll give you all the tools you need to ensure you become an anxiety master.
Thank you for listening. We have reached the end of this episode. If you enjoy this podcast and you find it helpful, I would really appreciate it if you would hit subscribe or share this episode on your Instagram stories and make sure you tag @Georgie the Naturopath. But that is all for today. Please be kind to yourselves. Know that you are enough and you are exactly where you need to be.